The coronavirus pandemic has forced countries to lock down, factories to either slow down or ground to a halt, and shipments to be delayed. With 1 week of enhanced community quarantine down and supposedly 3 more to go, many are now asking, do we even have enough essential supplies to last us for the rest of the lockdown? Joining us this afternoon, Charlie Villaseñor, CEO of Procurement and Supply Institute of Asia. Charlie, good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking our call.
Good afternoon. I hope everybody's staying calm and in prayers.
Charlie, let's start with food. There is a report going around that at least for the meat processors, current inventories of both finished goods and raw materials at the plants are good for just 2 weeks. Have you heard of the same thing?
Well, unfortunately, there was really information that was floating around. But again, we've heard it from the government, and we are assured that enough supplies are actually in the system. So we need to take it at that particular phase level.
Charlie, the reasons, considering that we do have enough supplies, to be able to make sure that these supplies are sustainable, we have to make sure that the reasons, the challenges are addressed. And one of the challenges the group cited would be checkpoints, hampering the transport of meats and ingredients, as well as packaging materials used in manufacturing, imported raw materials, also being held up at the ports. Charlie, do you think this is a problem of execution? Because the Trade Department has already released a memo, that's Memo 2006, that's supposed to ensure the unhampered transport of goods and people in industries that deal with essential goods. How do we address these choke points?
Well, these are true, and we expect that to happen in a logistics environment. We were not prepared to address all of these things, but we have seen how the government have actually moved, in mitigating all of the risks that the importers are actually trying to address. Until last night, we've received several updated information, and it seems it's actually being catered adequately. Customs is under skeletal force, and they're serving it based on turnaround times. The ports are open, and the people are actually managing the ports 100% in capacity. And the national police and everybody is trying to help out to make sure that the seamless flow of the goods that's actually being needed by the country.
Charlie, do you think that we're seeing a coordinated response from all LGUs? Because we have been hearing reports from some truckers, the trucking businesses, and they're saying that even when these shipments leave the ports, they get apprehended when they go into certain LGUs. For example, the one that we heard was from Navotas. There seems to be no concerted effort, no one unified direction of how things go. Is that what you're getting as well from your members?
Yeah, initially, as I said, we've actually heard those types of challenges. But, this is actually being assisted a lot, by the right government authorities. And a level of coordination is trying to get in place. So I would expect that in the meantime, when the activity is getting to be slower, all of these things is all going to be addressed adequately.
So,
obviously, there are just startup pains as we actually address this at the moment.
Charlie, are you confident that we're not going to run out of supplies or raw materials for our essential goods? Because a lot of these manufacturers are using a just-in-time sort of protocol, which means they only buy the raw materials when they need it. They don't have inventory in their warehouses stocked up for when they actually start producing. So all of this is dependent on how smoothly the transport will happen and will go.
Let me just say that this is not all about transportation or logistics. We have to take a look at the problem, at the root cause of why it's going to happen, on a very challenging environment. We have to take a look at it from a supply chain perspective, wherein we need to get some level of data that is going to be used and to sense and simulate whether we're really doing the right thing and we're actually addressing the problem. Second thing, we need to make sure that our procurement is actually well in place, because the normal buying of what we need for the country is not going to happen right now, because all of the countries have the same challenges, and these countries are trying to serve their first interest first. And for the Philippines, we need to be prepared for this. And logistics is a last mile approach to be able to transport and to warehouse and to distribute the goods. So what I'm actually saying here is like organizations has to come into play. It's not only the problem of the government. This is the problem of the business sector. Companies has to actually orchestrate into a single system to be able to coordinate make sure that we have enough data and we could act on those data adequately. For instance, as an example, what we need right now are medical supplies for the hospitals. I hear a lot that the hospitals are getting challenges in making sure that they have the right supplies for their own operations. The second area here is actually the food supplies. And the food supplies is not about just raw materials. Food supplies, as you notice, is actually composed of several factors to be able to supply it adequately. We need people, we need maintenance, repair, and operating supplies to run these plants to produce the food that we actually need. So scheduling and making sure that it's adequate is going to be very important. We need an orchestrated approach into this one. And the party that should actually be able to make this work are different stakeholders. But the business sector should really come up and make sure that they have a plan to actually address this.
So Charlie, going back to food, because I guess that's the most important now during a lockdown, do you think we can feed ourselves, that the Philippines can survive without having to import the food part?
This is only round one. There will be successive, situations that we will have to go through. And in this process, I could not, I would be very irresponsible if I say that we have adequate food, because we don't know until when the pandemic is going to actually end or where is it going to be arrested. Many countries have already stopped exporting. They are trying to secure their own supply. What certainly will happen there is we have to take a look at our own capability, because this is all about capacity constraints that's actually going to be addressed. Because if there are no local merchandise, then the household will be inadequate to buy the products or the food that they actually require. So it's very important that we have to find ways to actually make sure that there's actually going to be enough, supply of this food. But not only the food, but those things that are very necessary. If you can take a look, the most important here are the people who's going to help us get the food manufactured and produced and delivered. So first and foremost, the health and the well-being of the people are going to be very important. So we need to consolidate our resources. This cannot be done by a single company or a handful of companies. These companies has to come together and have what I call a national supply chain augmentation plan. The problem is not the problem of one industry. One industry is dependent from another industry. So we need to make sure that we have a center that can consolidate the data and to be able to execute a supply chain plan for the country. These problems that we're seeing about logistics, these checkpoints, these customs, they're going to be addressed adequately. But we need to get out of that particular area, and we have to actually move into more important areas to manage the supply chain. And that is all about supply chain planning. We need to see the demand latency and the supply latency of the supply chain.
Charlie,
we need to find out who needs what.
Yes, Charlie,
and what needs to be actually put on the system.
Charlie, I imagine you have a big picture of our supply chain in the Philippines. Are you confident that our supply chain can sustain for the next 1 to 2 months?
I think so. I think people are doing, and organizations and the government are freeing up the different constraints that they felt 1 or 2 weeks ago. So this thing is going to evolve to be more efficient. We need to keep the economy actually moving. There are a lot of several problems, not only on big organizations or companies. The problems are also going to come from SMEs who are inadequate in resources and ability to actually do the right thing for them to support the bigger conglomerates or the bigger industries. So, there's no time to panic, but we have time to actually execute a supply chain plan immediately.
Final question, Charlie. Is there a playbook? A playbook we can borrow perhaps from history or from what other countries have done to deal with supply chain management during a health crisis or a lockdown?
Definitely. These are the challenges that I will enumerate. One of the challenges is we don't have an integrated approach to be able to address national supply chain. The second thing is we are trying to operate in silos. We need to consolidate. Somebody has to orchestrate this. Third is we need a lot of data to be able to serve as trigger points of what we need to do. And we need to have a level of infrastructure. If we need a building full of supply chain professionals that will be able to provide a plan and execute the plan cross-industry, I think that's going to be the way to actually go and support it. So what do I suggest? We need to actually focus on supply chain planning, We need to make sure that our team going to lead this particular group has a strategic sourcing approach, because supplies are going to be inadequate for the whole world. We need to innovate on how we're going to meet our demands and our requirements. And the third thing is, like, because it's a three-legged approach, our logistics has to be enabled, not only from the private sector, but from the military. You know, if we know that there are goods that can be transported and we need adequate help, that we actually have to mobilize and work closely with the government to actually achieve that. This is not the problem of one company, or this is not the problem of the government. This is an opportunity for the private sector to actually move on an orchestrated approach. And we still haven't seen that at the moment. So we need to move now because time is running out.
Final question, Charlie. I couldn't help but ask. You mentioned orchestrated, concerted efforts several times during this interview. Do you think we need a COVID-19 czar? One person who gives out all the instructions, all LGUs to follow, all departments to follow. Do you think we need a COVID-19 czar?
Yeah, in terms of war, you need a logistics commander. You need a supply chain, commander to actually tell, lead, motivate the different parties, because there are several stakeholders here. So I will call that we need to actually get this person appointed, or this unit to be actually appointed. And we are here to actually support should it be necessary. We have a think tank in Pasilla comprised of several supply chain leaders, and I think we could adequately help.
On that note, thank you very much, Charlie, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, sir.
Keep praying. Thank you very much.